Hello ladies and gentlemen, you're watching NDTV. What has been happening for the last 3 to 4 days is nothing less than a war. This is what India's DGMO said today while briefing the media a day after ceasefire was announced. The Indian Army said that 35 to 40 personnel of Pakistani Army had been killed at the LOC between May 7th and May 10th. They added that more than 100 terrorists have also been killed in strikes that were carried out by Indian armed forces at 9 terror targets, which included Pulwama attackers and also hijackers of IC-814. We'll get you all that and more, the highlights of this briefing, but time to just look at some reactions.
The locations that emerged were numerous, but as we deliberated more, we realized that some of these terror hubs were now bereft of any presence and had preemptively been vacated, fearing retribution from us. There was also a term of reference and our own binding, self-imposed restriction to target only terrorists and thus prevent collateral damage. There were 9 camps that you are now all familiar with, which were confirmed by our various intelligence agencies to be inhabited. Some of these were in POJK, while there were others that were located in the Punjab province in Pakistan. Nefarious places such as Muridke, the hub center of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, has over the years bred infamous characters such as Ajmal Kasab and the likes of David Headley.
Now coming to Bhavalpur, this is the target complex that we are dealing with, a fairly large target complex. So we had to carefully choose the points that we needed to address, which were high value and which would meet our stated objectives of eliminating the terrorists. I would like to draw your attention to this red canopy, and in relation to that, I would cover the targets. One target system is a series of buildings here, other one here, and other one out here.
In the evening of 7th of May, we were saturated with a raid of Pakistani unmanned aerial vehicles and small drones. The difference here was that we had targeted the terrorists. The adversary now has targeted our civilians and the military infrastructure. So it had to be responded to. So in a quick and calibrated response, that very night, we struck their radar installations at Lahore and close to Gujranwala, the LYT installation, to indicate to him that we are ready, yet we do not want to escalate. Our fight was with the terrorists and not with the Pakistani military establishment. In a measured and calibrated response, we once again targeted his military installations, which included his SAM sites at Malirkant. This also included his surveillance radar sites at Lahore and close to Gujranwala. A decision was taken to strike where it would hurt. And towards that, in a swift, coordinated, calibrated attack, we struck his air bases, command centers, military infrastructure, air defense systems across the entire Western Front. The bases we struck include Chaklala, Rafiki, and mind you, Chaklala is Islamabad. Rahim Yar Khan, Sakar, sending a clear message that aggression will not be tolerated. This was followed by strikes at Sargoda, Bholari, Jacobabad. We also struck the C2 centers at Murid, the UAE complex at Murid, Rafiki, radar at Chunia, which I will show you, Rahim Yar Khan airfield, and the unmanned combat aerial vehicle hangar at Sakar.
I have no doubt in my mind that we achieved total surprise, and those strikes across those 9 terror hubs left more than 100 terrorists killed, including high-value targets such as Yusuf Azhar, Abdul Malik Rauf, and Mudassir Ahmed that were involved in the hijack of IC-814 and the Pulwama blast. The line of control was also violated soon after by Pakistan, and the erratic and rattled response of our enemy was apparent from the number of civilians, inhabited villages, and religious sites such as Gurudwaras that were unfortunately hit by them, leading to a sad loss of lives.
Indian Armed Forces making it clear that the aim of the ceasefire was to stop firing immediately, and in the next step is to also discuss its longevity. The DGMO has reiterated that India will watch what happens tonight to assess Pakistan's positioning from here, and that any threat to our territorial integrity or to our citizens will be met with decisive force. Remember, this is the first briefing of the DGMO after the ceasefire understanding, which is why it's extremely important. I'm joined by my colleagues now, Vishnu Shom. I also have Shiv Arur joining us from Jammu and Kashmir. We also have Nazir joining us from J&K, and also Harsha joining us from Jaisalmer. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast. Vishnu, to you first. First of all, tell us about this big announcement that came from Donald Trump yesterday. First, about the ceasefire, and then about his offer to mediate in the issue of Kashmir. How is the Indian government looking at this? How is it hoping to navigate this diplomatically?
Vasudha, thanks very much. You know, it's been an evening of fast-paced developments. On the one hand, you've got that huge press conference by the armed forces, which has taken place separately. I've met senior sources who've given me a sense of where the government stands on a lot of what has taken place. As far as that tweet by Trump offering to mediate on Kashmir is concerned, the response is that there is no discussion with Pakistan on Kashmir that will take place. And as far as Trump's tweet, there is no change on India's stance on Kashmir. So essentially saying the same thing. I think the larger message that government sources are telling us is this: no matter the message to Pakistan, no matter where you are, we will hit you. We have gone this time for the head of the snake, not for the soldiers. The force of Indian arms on this occasion showed the Pakistanis that this was not going to be a winning proposition for them. That Pakistan took notice of the technological capabilities and tactics and procedures. This must have come home to the Pakistanis. One very important point that I did pick up is that shortly after India launched our attacks at the terrorist hubs in Muridke, in Bahawalpur, in Muzaffarpur and other places, the Indian Director General of Military Operations called up his Pakistani counterpart and said, look, this is what we have done. This is the reason we've done it. We do not want to escalate. At that stage, that was rebuffed and Pakistan launched its counterattacks. But just within 48 hours, it was the Pakistani Director General of Military Operations who called up his Indian counterpart, our Director General of Military Operations, and said, no, look, if you don't fire, we won't fire either. And the sense among the sources that I spoke to is that it seemed quite clear that Pakistan was reacting on the basis of the very strong Indian air-to-ground attacks, or the attacks on air bases, which have taken place and taken place very successfully.
Thank you, Vishnu. Also joining us is Shiv. One thing that really became clear in this briefing is that Indian Armed Forces' aggressive response prompted Pakistan's urgent request for ceasefire. In fact, the Armed Forces officials also took questions, Shiv. Help us understand when they say that India holds quantitative and qualitative edge to deliver massive blow to Pakistan. Help us understand this claim, or at least this confidence.
It basically means three things, Vasudha. Good evening to all of our viewers. It basically means that A, the ceasefire or the understanding that was achieved yesterday was achieved from a position of total strength. It was Pakistan that came to India after 11 of its air bases was struck. All of it, depicted in vivid clarity using battle damage imagery in this excellent press conference. And therefore, Pakistan, which feared a further escalation escalation where some of its strategic or energy assets would be struck next by India, had literally gone pleading to the United States saying you need to step in or do something about it. So that was one. Point number two was the Indian armed forces, which had so far shown restraint, expressed restraint, suddenly in a matter of just 90 minutes, Vasudha, last morning, escalated things to such a degree that there was a shock and awe effect on Pakistan. They didn't realize that the Indian Air Force and the Indian government and political leadership meant that operational freedom would be long-range offensive strikes at the very heart of the Pakistan military establishment. Things could still be understood if terrorist infrastructure was blown apart, but to actually hit places like Chaklala, Sargoda, Jacobabad, even Skardu in the northern areas meant that the Indian government was not playing around, they were not joking, and there would be no advance notice about this kind of thing. Third point is following the small violations that took place after the understanding was achieved yesterday, the big radiating message that has gone out today is the smallest deviation, violation, distraction from this understanding which India has entered into, not just in good faith, but with its guard completely up, is going to mean that Pakistan will have hell to pay. That was something that all three Director Generals of Ops of the three individual armed forces actually said. They've made it very clear that all commanders, operational commanders on the line of control, international border, have been given the complete tactical and strategic, that word was used, Vasudha, tactical and strategic freedom to take any kinetic action necessary as an operational retaliation. So this basically means that India has said, we've gone into this understanding with you, Pakistan, because nobody wants a huge conflagration that can spill over into the region. But please remember what has happened to you. And I think Pakistan understands that. This press conference was just, in many ways, a kind of messaging icing on that cake, Vasudha.
Vishnu, back to you. From this press conference, there is a sense that a lot of us get that India clearly was on the offensive. It had capabilities to take on Pakistan. So why did it agree to a ceasefire yesterday? What are your government sources saying in that regard?
Well, so that's a key question, and the answer is that India didn't ask for a ceasefire. It was the Pakistanis who wanted a ceasefire. It was our Director General of Military Operations who received a phone call from his counterpart from Pakistan. Just 2 days earlier, we had called the Pakistani DGMO and said that, look, we have struck these terror camps and we don't want to escalate. That was rebuffed. But within 48 hours, that DGMO called up our Director General of Military Operations and said that if you don't fire, we won't fire. And the sense is that this was done entirely because of the success of the Indian hits on several Pakistani air bases, the visuals of which have now emerged. These were precision hits. These were very powerful hits. And it made clear to the Pakistanis that, look, if you do this, then India is just going up the escalation matrix and their ability to strike targets on the ground is very, very strong. Pakistan also, remember, tried to attack many of our air bases as well. There was a huge attack on Adampur, for example. However, the success of those operations was very limited. They did not achieve damage in the same manner in which we did. They went to the extent of firing a weapon which has been described to me as being a near hypersonic, but that missed its target and fell a few kilometers away from the target. This was the attack on Adampur. Over a period of time, the message seemed clear to the Pakistanis that, look, India comes at this with a greater ability to hit targets on the ground in Pakistan, which is why it is important perhaps for Pakistan to get into a ceasefire solution. At the same time, it does need to be mentioned that the government sources I spoke to have corroborated that J.D. Vance, in his conversation with his Indian counterparts over here, did indicate that there were signs that Pakistan might do something large, might actually increase, whatever it is that they wanted to do militarily. Within a couple of hours of that, they did launch these attacks on the Indian air bases, but those were not successful. And then when India counterattacked, the Pakistanis backed down. So my reading of this, Vasudha, in terms post my conversation with very senior sources, is that we believe militarily we have pushed the Pakistanis down. But the larger question over here is that if Pakistan does this, what these attacks have proven is that India has gone for the head of the snake. We've not gone for soldiers. This is now the new normal. If you hit us, we're going to hit you back. It's being stated very, very directly. So that's my sense. I'll just read that quote out again. No matter where you are, we will hit you. We've gone for the head of the snake, not for the soldiers.
Right. Thank you, Vishnu, for those details. Shiv, I do feel that this probably was the most important press conference by the armed forces, because this is for the first time we officially got to know that India also struck Pakistani air bases, along the Western Front. This is also the first time the names of the high-value targets, the terrorists, came out, and these are the same terrorists who basically participated or were perpetrators of the IC-814 hijack or Pulwama terror. Explain to us the optics, the symbolism, and the most important points that were made in this press conference today.
The amazing mix of both symbolism and material damage that has been displayed by the Indian Air Force and the Indian Armed Forces this time, Vasudha, is in some ways spectacular. And I don't mean that as an exaggeration, because all of these targets were materially damaging to the Pakistani state, the Pakistan military, the terror infrastructure, but each of them is also hugely symbolic. For instance, the Noor Khan Air Base, which is in Rawalpindi, right next to Islamabad, is materially speaking a very important logistics hub. VIP aircraft, go from there. It is a refueling center, and mid-air refueling squadron is based there. But it's also hugely symbolic because it is in Rawalpindi, which is basically the capital city of the Pakistan military. Similarly, Murid Ke, Bahawalpur, Muzaffarabad, the battle damage imagery that has come out has demonstrated that the Indian Air Force and the Indian military in general this time, the priority was not just about causing damage, but to be seen to be causing damage. Remember, in 2019, even though the Indian Air Force, performed in a stellar manner in bombing Balakot, it became a mess of claims and counterclaims. This time, the images speak louder than any words can actually convey, because the images of the damage, radar centers smashed, a runway with a hole in it, buildings reduced to rubble, sensor facilities in ashes. Those are the images that were shown by the Indian Air Force at today's briefing, and you can't argue with battlefield transparency that has been brought to the table like this. My three big takeaways, I would say, Vasudha, from today's press conference about the new things that we know so far. I think the naval operations, since they were, out at sea proverbially and materially, is the biggest headline for me. The Indian Navy basically created a kind of offensive blockade in the northern Arabian Sea, which forced the Pakistan Navy to remain either in harbor or very close to sea. They simply couldn't venture out. They were completely pinned in, completely caged in, and the Indian Navy, very importantly, saying they had sensors and target information on Karachi and were ready to destroy the Karachi harbor at short notice. That is takeaway for me, number one. Takeaway number two, the way in which the Pakistan Air Force hid behind international airliners. We already know about this, but the Indian Air Force was very, very candid when they said it basically posed a tactical disadvantage to them, Vasudha, because the Indian Air Force was basically unable sometimes to fire missiles because there were civil aircraft in the air. The Indian Armed Forces are a moral force, unlike the Pakistan Air Force, which was hiding with a human shield behind civil airliners. The third and very crucial thing, and these are the small details that sometimes get missed, Vasudha. The third thing that gets missed, and is a huge headline for me, is that the Indian Army has confirmed that the Pakistan Army and their special forces or even terrorists were trying to cross the line of control during those ceasefire violations. Now, this could mean three or four things. It could mean either that they were trying to, on foot attack army posts on the Indian side of the LOC. They may have been trying to occupy some space, take over territory across the line of control if it was special forces and the regular Pakistan army, or it could have been as some kind of a bargaining chip before the actual ceasefire. These are very, very serious points that have been raised by the armed forces today, and I think that justifies and explains why they've taken such a hard stance and issued that warning to Pakistan. The smallest deviations is going to be a major escalation from India.
Right. Thank you, Shiv, and thank you, Vishnu, for joining us with those big takeaways of that press conference by Indian Armed Forces, and also what really led to that ceasefire. Thank you so much for joining us. Also joining me now is Harsha from Jaisalmer. It's a border district in Rajasthan. She's been reporting from Jaisalmer for the last few days. We also have Nazir joining us from JNK. To you, Harsha, first, what is the advisory that's been sent out to people people there, Harsha? Because clearly of the several locations that were under attack, at least targeted by Pakistan by missile strikes, many of them actually were in Rajasthan. There were also debris that was found. How are people of Rajasthan looking at the ceasefire announcement? Is there a sense of normalcy, or is there still a sense of fragility of peace?
Well, Vasudha, definitely from as far as the administration is concerned, there's a heightened sense of vigilance that continues. So I'm in Jaisalmer, I'm in the middle of a very busy market, but as you can see, there's a complete blackout behind me. And perhaps all you can see is maybe the moon and the outlines of the Mandir Palace. So, this was supposed to happen at 11 o'clock. No, it's happened at 7:30. All border towns are still on red alert. I spoke to police sources earlier in the day today. They said no rollback, no de-escalation, alertness will remain, augmentation of police stations with extra forces, RAC units will remain stationed here. I also spoke to people who are in the paramilitary, and they said that alertness will remain. Now, of course, the situation and the dynamics is different in Rajasthan because we do have the largest and the longest border with Pakistan, but it's an international border. It's a fenced border. It's not the line of control. So, the kind of transgressions perhaps on the international border will not happen the way you will see them at the line of control further north from me. But at the same time, like you said, even last night, we did hear explosions in Jaisalmer, in Barmer. These are very important civilian and strategic installations are here in Rajasthan, as there are all along in India. So, of course, very sensitive from that point of view. And the alertness, the levels of, vigilance have not gone down. So people are, of course, going about their business as normal. But 7:30 in the evening, everyone's been advised to go home and remain there till 6 a.m. in the morning, even as the police and the administration and also the paramilitary remains on alert on the western border.
Thank you, Harsha, for joining us. Nazir, to you now. Thank you so much for waiting patiently. Also, help us understand. I know that you've travelled across J&K. Many civilians have died because of this indiscriminate shelling by Pakistan in the last few days. But yesterday also, Jammu and Kashmir was on the edge because of the explosions that were heard in Srinagar just few minutes after the ceasefire was announced. Does the night look any better today?
Touch wood, it is calm. It is relatively peaceful. There's no indication or report from anywhere that there's a fresh violation. No. Since morning, it is really calm. And night was also really calm. Yesterday evening, this time, it was really, literally, as they say, fireworks. There were explosions. There was drone activity here in Srinagar. On the line of control and borders, there was heavy shelling going on. But after a few hours, things actually became calm. And since then, it's holding on. Let's hope it holds ceasefire. They have done it before. For example, in February 2021, India and Pakistan DGMOs agreed a ceasefire along the line of control, and that's holding on for long till the time we had this Pahalgam massacre, and that changed everything in Jammu and Kashmir. And you would hear about that in my exclusive interview with J&K Chief Umar Abdullah. I just had that interview with him, which we will play in after some time. He's talking in great detail. But the fact is that on the ground, we see is a huge relief for the people here in Jammu and Kashmir who bear the brunt of this shelling from across the border. But the police have issued an advisory to people not to rush back to their homes near the line of control, because a lot of unexploded shells, maybe they are scattered there, so there need to be a clearance operation first by the police and security force. Only then they can rush there, go back to their homes. So they have to wait even after things may look normal at the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir. But people who have been affected or who had to flee from their homes have to wait till the time the clearance, government gives the clearance to go back. So police have issued an advisory. But the larger thing, people see that this the first massacre of innocent tourists and then the attack on Pakistan, terror sites, will that actually serve the end purpose, which is whether militancy will end in Jammu and Kashmir, whether we will see complete halt of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir so that people can live in peace, so that no one who comes here as a tourist dies in an attack, so that people don't lose their livelihood. because it's not just what we see on the borders or the larger picture of military. It has a real impact on the lives and the livelihood of people, and the place which we would say bustling place, it is literally a ghost town at many places. It's not just the line of control. If you see Srinagar, it is really terrible here.
Right, ghost towns at many places from Kashmir to Rajasthan. That is a very surreal way of putting this. Thank you, Nazir, for joining us. Indian Armed Forces maintain a deterrent posture, and this was what really came about in that important press conference that was held by Indian Armed Forces officials today. And they've made it very clear that any ceasefire violation by Pakistan will trigger fierce punitive response from India. With that, it's time for a short break. More news and updates on the other side. Welcome back. India has made it clear today any future Pakistani aggression will be met with an overwhelming force. This was at an important briefing today by armed forces officials. They have said that India, in a swift, coordinated and calibrated response, struck key Pakistani military assets, and these included air bases, command centers, military infrastructure and air defense systems across the Western Front. What we also understand is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi reportedly warned the United States of America that India will not tolerate terror and will not allow mediation with Kashmir, specifically on the Kashmir front. During the briefing on Operation Sindoor today, Indian Armed Forces have said that the Army's aim was to target terrorists and their infrastructure, not any other infrastructure, specifically not Pakistani civilian or military establishment. They also added that this was achieved with precision. They stated that the key difference between India and Pakistan was that India had targeted terrorists, while Pakistan's army response was focused on civilians and military infrastructure. Now, armed officials have also said that in response to this, Indian Army struck installations near Lahore and also close to Gujranwala. Pakistan violated ceasefire agreement hours after the agreement, and the army granted full authority for retaliation. That's what was also told in this important press conference. Also joining me now to discuss all of this is former Ambassador Shashank, who's been a former Foreign Secretary. We also have Mr. Manjeet Puri. He is also a former diplomat. Thank you both of you for joining me on this broadcast. Mr. Puri, to you first. How would you assess India's Operation Sindoor? Has it finally established a new doctrine of preemptive deterrence against Pakistan? Because today we were informed that India's strike was also at air bases, command centers, military infrastructure. So it was not just responding to Pakistan.
Vasudha, thank you very much. I think, I was listening to your colleagues reporting. I think there should be no doubt that it has clearly demonstrated India's ability. It has demonstrated that we not only have the ability to strike, but strike deep and strike where it can hurt and which gets noticed. Let's be very crystal clear. We are a $4 trillion economy, a huge army. We are a very changed country and going places. And it's time that the Pakistanis realize this particular thing. And so, therefore, I think this particular point, there's almost nothing to debate. We've made our point strongly to them that, look, we were not interested in getting into this. But when you did what you did, there would be a response, and the response was solid, swift, but it was also precise, and it was one which was targeted and done exactly as per our plan. No doubt about that at all. So, in that sense, the message clearly conveyed to the Pakistanis, to the world, and of course, to our own population, that we have the abilities to be strong in our defense. No doubt about that at all.
Mr. Shashank, how do you see Pakistan recalibrating its strategy after whatever has happened, this military blow that has been dealt by Operation Sindoor? In other words, how should India prepare for what is to come?
So my colleague Manjeev has already given very good assessment of what is going on. What I would like to say is that we expect Pakistan to change its behavior, to detach itself from backing the terrorists and show that it is not just putting out to FATF and the UN counter-terrorism committees that those terrorists are no longer visible in Pakistan, but really show that they are not really going and reading fatwa or reading prayers to respect those terrorists who have been killed by the Indians. So I think this is the expectation of India and the whole world from Pakistan. Pakistan has got $1.1 billion out of the $7 billion which was promised to them last year. So that means that Pakistan has to abide by certain international obligations. What Pakistan's behavior so far has been that they carry out these terrorist acts and they hope that either India would not react at all or would react in a very minor manner, even though across the border, to attack a few terrorist camps. And then they will once again build up the same terrorist infrastructure and carry out the activities as always, and then also have the overall umbrella of their nuclear weapon, which they had perhaps not prepared themselves. Maybe the Chinese just handed it over to them and got it tested in Lucknow. So I think that is the situation that Pakistan has to now show that it is changing its attitude. If it cannot change the attitude, I'm sure that there new doctrine that any terrorist act will be treated as an act of war, and that has a lot of implications under the international law.
That's very important. Mr. Puri, how do you, like today's press conference made it very clear that India was clearly on the offensive. It had capabilities to take on Pakistan. In a circumstance like that, why do you think India really agreed to the ceasefire? Because nobody wants war here. Do you think the communication of this could have been different, considering that it came from President Trump first? How do you see India navigating the perception of this?
Vasudha, look, I'm at a great disadvantage having my former boss, Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary here. It's very kind of him to have said that I had assessed things right. Look, Vasudha, for any of us to expect, and sir, I duly respect what you say in terms of your wish, to expect that Pakistan will change its state policy, I don't think so. This is a limited kind of thing for this particular moment. You know, they found themselves a bit cornered, a little bit out of steam. And also, please remember the geopolitical changes. President Trump, no war on my watch. The fact that, you know, India is a nuclear armed state, so are they, and so many other things happening. The Saudis coming to India, President Trump going to Riyadh in the coming days. There are lots of issues that they were kind of pushed into the back foot, and I'm sure they turned to them and said, do something. Look, Vasudha, the question that you're asking could have been handled differently. You know, we can keep on debating this, but on the ground, many people would say, thank God the guns are silent. That's one thing we should all appreciate. On our side, let us be very clear that we have proven our points and done it solidly and in a crystal clear manner to them that we have the abilities, and now we are even doctrinally going to be up on that. So please be mindful that they are unlikely to do so. That's a different matter. That's the nature of that particular state, a state where the army runs the state and so on and so forth, and where terrorism is a part of state policy. So let's also understand this particular thing. Many people are talking about it. President Trump treating first and all. Look, Vasudha, I think we should understand this, that somehow or the other, whether it was a role of mediator or not, I don't know. But somehow or the other, they were in the know of things. Otherwise, you know, the fact that they were able to tweet it a few minutes before, the fact that a call from their DGMO, our DGMO was primed to say yes, all of this. Look, let's accept it. Let's not get too much into all this.
Absolutely.
We agreed when we were in a position of strength, when we had demonstrated this to the Pakistanis, to the world, and the Americans had noted it. I want to draw your attention to a very important article in the New York Times, where some of the reasons have been very well listed by correspondents who cover the White House, who said that the Americans realized that the Pakistanis were putting themselves in a very difficult situation, and they might even possibly be contemplating, no one is talking about that, etc. But remember one more thing. We also are now a player much beyond this hyphenated India-Pakistan business.
Yes.
We are a global country, the fourth largest economy, and we have geopolitical equities with everyone, the Chinese included, but certainly with the United States. And so, therefore, these particular things have to be viewed on a larger canvas as far as we are concerned. The fact that it happened at a time when our strength was demonstrated and clearly there is for all to see. The rest of it, it's okay. Whatever has happened, it's fine. Our position has been clear and demonstrated that we are a country which is strong, which is capable, and that stands clearly demonstrated in the world. Also, that we are a responsible country and that we are a country which is willing to play its role on the global high table and act in a responsible manner.
Absolutely, that's very well said. Also, Mr. Shashank, help us understand what is the larger messaging that India has managed to send out with Operation Sindoor, specifically targeting those terror bases and remaining committed to its resolve that it does not want any civilian deaths. Do you think that this is something that the international community will take note of?
I'm not sure whether the international community will be able to take note of it, because I don't think there are any observers available. So it's a question of what Pakistan tells them and what India tells them, and what all proof they can show to them. I'm quite sure that both sides will be doing it. The point is that Pakistani media has been saying that many of their top leaders have sent their families away out of Pakistan. And some of them have also been reporting that some of these senior bigwigs have been making plans to leave. Now, would that be part of the New York Times story that my colleague is referring to, that they would like to leave and then do whatever they want to do in the hope that, well, okay, if people of Pakistan and people of India suffer, so be it. At least they would be able to take advantage of whatever money they have earned in the past. So I think that is what we have to keep in mind, that they are irresponsible people. We want them to become more responsible. It is very unlikely that they will become so. So we have taken our doctrine that, okay, I mean, if you carry out those activities, we'll once again give you the same response with the same speed and precision. We are, of course, very mindful that we should not do anything to damage the security of the ordinary people. But what it means is that, well, at least their terrorist infrastructure and those who are supporting their terrorist infrastructure would be taken care of, irrespective of the time that we may need to catch them.
Right. The same question to both of you. Mr. Puri, first to you. What impact will China's backing of Pakistan at a time like this have on India's foreign policy? Also, how do you see Donald Trump's offer to mediate specifically with regard to Kashmir? How do you see India navigating this diplomatically?
So, Vasudha, look, as far as the Chinese are concerned, it's not covert, it's overt. Everybody knows them, that they support them. Even at the United Nations, they speak up for them. But it is my feeling that somehow in this case, the Chinese also turned around and told the Pakistanis, hey guys, settle this quickly. And I'll tell you the reason. One, the Pakistanis have used 2 days to try and somehow assuage their own public that, you know, they are a capable government, a capable army, they can defend them, etc., etc. But the Chinese also saw that, look, you were actually being denuded and there was no point going any further. Secondly, remember, the Chinese are in discussions with the United States on perhaps the most important thing for the entire globe at the moment, trade between America and the Chinese. And at such a time, with the Americans pushing in a particular direction, you think they'd like to push in the other direction? No, I don't think so. Now, look, we have an issue with the Chinese. That's a completely different set of issues. And that's something that we need to be extremely mindful of. And we are always mindful of that. But the facts are also, we trade with them. They are making overtures to us. We need to play this game extremely importantly, diplomatically, delicately. You know, in a sense, balancing our economic needs, our economic possibilities, along with the fact that they are what they are, a country which, you know, has in the past and continues to demonstrate a certain kind of design as far as we are concerned, something that we have to be very cognizant of.
Right.
President Trump.
Right.
Now, President Trump. Look, you know, you've read that longish tweet in which he said all the things. The business of trade. I mentioned to you that there are geopolitical equities that we talk about. You know, trade with the United States is certainly of very great importance to us. And it's something which is the #1 priority for President Trump.
Right.
And, you know, we have been one of the countries identified as a positive country, which could give him a kind of domestic win, perhaps good for us also in terms of reforms in India and so on and so forth.
Right.
On Kashmir, look, our stated position, at least from the time that I have been around and Ambassador Shashank was Foreign Secretary, you know, we say it's a bilateral matter, we will deal with it. And I certainly believe that's important.
Okay.
But on the other hand,
completely out of time, Mr. Shashank, quickly, you know, a few words from you, closing remarks, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, I can say that China would like to test out its weapons, as they had done that in Ukraine war earlier, and now they would like to do that here also. And Pakistan had also sent many of its weapons through UK and sold them off to Ukraine. But at the other side, I think we have been telling China to behave more responsibly as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, for which we were very much responsible for getting them into into that seat. So China, I think, is not against. They would like to definitely go against the terrorists, but they feel that, okay, terrorists sitting in Pakistan are an asset for them. So therefore, there is this kind of a dual approach which they have. But as Manji said, that right now their main emphasis is on their trade talks with the Americans, which they are hoping that they would be able to bring down the duties, etc., and carry out their operations.
Right. Thank you both of you for joining me on this broadcast. Multiple takeaways there and also long-ranging consequences of Operation Sindoor. We'll keep discussing all that and more. Time for a short break. More news and updates on the other side.